I guess we'll just get started then. Okay, so who am I? As Chris said, I'm Zach. I'm currently the Pixel Whisperer at South by Southwest, and my job basically involves managing the installations, the config, and the front-end development for all of the Drupal installs, and then a handful of other apps that are written in Rails and JavaScript. So I'm spread out across a bunch of stuff. But I happen to be the only one there who is a, air quotes, professional Drupal user. And so if there's ever a question or something breaks or I break something, I'm the one who's accountable and I have to fix it immediately. So it's fun. If you guys have never been to South by Southwest or don't know what it is, we're an event producer and manager, and our real strength is that we have a knack for combining people in multiple industries and bringing them all together and starting cool projects based on the conversations that happen at our festivals. So a lot of cool startups get kicked off at South by, a lot of cool products get launched, cool bands get noticed, et cetera, et cetera. So it's kind of a place where all things entertainment and interactive converge. So this is my miniature disclaimer. I'm a professional, but nothing I do is perfect. So if you find problems, feel free to harass me with them, because I miss things. And when you're working on X number of projects, details get kind of get forgotten often, and it's good to have extra pairs of eyes out there and say, no, Zach, you're doing this wrong. And that will make me better, and thus the pool of knowledge grows. So I'll start with the why component of Drupal. Am I going too fast? Is everybody okay? All right, cool. So the major reason that Drupal was selected out of a handful of PHP free PHP content management systems were there was that it had all the tenets of things that our system admins liked and our content creators wanted. So up until, and I can't remember the exact date, I think it's 2009, that's right. Up until 2009, they've been running on an in-house CMS, and before that it was a flat file system. And with every iteration of the event, information grows. So they were just constantly expanding, but there was no good way to maintain it, and the CMS they had was dying a slow, horrible death. And so they started using Drupal in 5.7. That was before me. And they've been growing with it and have used contractors and local services to make sure that everything's going. But mainly there was a group of about 3 to 4 people that took care of everything related to the website starting in 2009. And so like all the great PHP content management systems out there, had a good module and plugin variety, and user access levels were a very important part of the workflow for publishing content on southbysouthwest.com. And at the time, I should mention also that there wasn't the 4 events. So there was just one, and I think EDU had just started, but it wasn't on Drupal yet, because it was still a baby. So one of the things that happens constantly and why Drupal continues to be a mainstay is that our publishing workflows change, and sometimes they change in the middle of the season. I should point out that South by Southwest operates 9 months ahead of everyone else in terms of what we're working on. So in our minds, mentally, 2014 is over. And as of March 17th, 2015 begins, because we're starting the next round of planning. So we take time to kind of digest what went well, what didn't go well with the site, the event, our communication staff, our social media, et cetera, and we try to figure out what's going to be the things that we can improve, what we have time to improve, and what we can implement for the next season. But during the event, a lot of things change. So, and luckily Drupal is very friendly in a lot of respects for the things that we use it for. So a lot of it is posts and pages and maybe a few special content types that need to have new fields or have different displays during certain blocks or periods of time like if we're promoting a special event and we want to be able to show you a live stream, and we get a last minute vendor that pays to have branding on it, we have to be able to facilitate all that. So that is sort of that is one of the main things that keeps us in Drupal. Yeah, so the other part of it is content migration. So there's been sort of a so in each year we kind of decide whether or not we're going to keep all of our content from the last season or just blow it all away and start from zero. And this season we decided to keep it, and the migration process was really smooth this time, and we were able to move all of our blogs and posts and stuff like that and start reorganizing them in a way that made sense. And it was something that we could do, like, it was work that I could show somebody how to do the workflow and then they could run through it and I didn't have to be there to watch them. So that was a big support for me. So the other thing that has changed over each season is the requirements for each type of post. So from 2012 to now, there have been a range of file sizes, image dimensions, post lengths, all sorts of things that weren't really finalized. And each year we kind of zero in on what makes the most sense for us, or we actually, in places where we didn't have a policy, we just kind of we said, okay, well, this seems to be working the best, let's use this, and that becomes the policy. So that is part of the reason that Drupal continues to be our friend. So unlike working in an agency where you can kind of massage timelines, there are none of that in SouthPy. There's only hard deadlines. So when they say, Zach, you have 3 weeks to launch a site, that is literally the amount of time I have. I can't not miss it. So this works well and bad at the same time. Obviously there's the stress of oh, I gotta get this thing done. But then there's the benefit of being able to negotiate features based on your timeline. You guys wanted all this new stuff, sorry, that's not gonna happen. You can choose these things and then we can move forward. And so it's kind of a good thing because it allows me and some of the content administrators a bargaining chip. Okay, I'll back up a second because this is a little confusing. So one of the things about the company's structure overall is it's very flat, but essentially internally there are, for every department is treated essentially like an internal client. So there's the sales department, housing, music, film, interactive, and they all have kind of a say on their section of the site. And they want input and they want to have flexibility, even though they personally may not be doing the grunt work of adding in the content or having to make a design fit a certain constraint. So when I talk about bargaining, it's basically a way for us to say, we want to meet everybody's wants, but you're only going to get X number of wants based on the amount of time we have left. So features and changes happen over longer periods of time. So the first year that their site was responsive was 2013. And then this year, there's been a refinement of how that process worked, and there's been some reorganization of the menu structure and things like that. Also, if you ever wanted to go back through and look at the catalog of older sites, you can go to 2000, I think starting 2009.sxswu.com, all the way up to obviously the present one. There's an active site. There's broken files and stuff like that, but for the most part, you can look through the evolution of each of the sites, and it's kind of fascinating.
So, a couple questions if I may?
Yeah.
How many people are we talking about at this organization, and when you do planning, do you plan out multi-year? I mean, do you have 5 or 10 year plan, which is crazy in technology terms?
Absolutely not, but I will tell you, we don't have a plan most of the time. We have a plan for next year,
yeah,
basically. So we're, like I said about the being 9 months ahead, we're thinking about 2015 now. We're thinking about what we want to change in all of our services for 2015 now, and what we're going to do with Drupal in 2015 now.
I guess that makes sense.
So, and I'll get into some of the numbers here in a minute. So yeah, maybe next year, or when we say that, we mean maybe next season, the thing that you want will have time to do. So let me talk about the how a little bit. Our production is just a vanilla Linux VM on a slice that we own, and we have a couple of data centers that we have boxes on, and that's how we keep our security, basically, is that we own the hardware and we own everything about connection to it. So our two sysadmins are responsible for making sure it's pretty hardened, and we get regular pen tests and stuff like that, and they try to breach our apps, and sometimes they do, and we fix those holes, and sometimes they don't, and we feel a great relief. We use Postgres and Varnish and Memcache. I didn't list that, but I guess those are sort of givens with the amount of traffic. So some things to note, during certain portions of the year, obviously we'll have what we call low traffic, which is like 100,000 users anonymous per month. Then during the event, that turns into 100,000 users a day. So there's a huge spike basically from the window of March 7th to March 17th where the earth seems to descend on southbysouthwest.com as well as Austin. And it just, the first year that I was working there, we watched the site get pushed over really quickly, and we had to learn how to make the infrastructure more hardened. And there's sort of an internal desire to keep things lean and effective. So our team is small, our hardware install is generally small, and we've just started to kind of bulk up the technology. So last year was the first year, or did I say last year we pushed over? Or say the first year I started, 2012. Was the first event that the site got pushed over, and then starting in 2013, we had bulked up our infrastructure, didn't see the tidal wave destroy anything, so we felt pretty cocky. But that can all change. And then for development, everything's on Amazon EC2, so we have cloud VMs that get spun up for every domain, and basically it's pretty regular. So there's a development environment that I break and refresh constantly, and then there's a staging environment where when I say something's safe to start plopping in and testing content, that's where all of our content administrators go to. And then if that's kosher, they replicate some of that work on the production site. So we don't roll database forward, we only roll it backwards. And part of the reason behind that is basically it's paranoia. We would rather that someone had to click publish than some stupid checkbox got checked that broke something else that we don't know about. So that's part of the thinking behind it. And then for modules, it's pretty thin. There's not a lot going on here that you probably wouldn't see in a general fashion. We've got all the usual suspects. Use features, jQuery update, markdown filter, menu attributes, menu block, etc. And sometimes these things work really great, and sometimes they don't in our environment, and we have to find ways to work around it. One of the culprits, menu block, has a bug specific to Postgres that creates some link confusion. So we have to put in full path links for certain things, otherwise the menu doesn't know who its daddy is. So it's just stuff like that. You catch little things that have to do with the oddness of the environment you're using. Let's see. So theme development. Last year's iterations of our Drupal sites, I was using less, and we'd homegrown a template system that was very capable for us, and we were using Git for distributing code changes. And this year, the theme is improved, moved to Sass, but we're using rsync for everything because there literally wasn't time to integrate Git across all of the installs. So to give you a semi-firm number of the number of installs that we have, take each of our properties, there are 4 right now, you triple that number, and then you add about 4 or 5 other dangling items, and that's the number of Drupal installs that are all running around right now. And those are the ones that are actively being developed. There's a bunch that are like archived, they're just sitting there, nobody touches, but those are the ones that I'm paying attention to, basically. And if I decide that I need to make a change in the theme, or I need to add a feature across all of them, I have to go do it in at least 2/3 of those places. So it can be kind of a headache. So the nice thing about using rsync to do that is that I can quickly push a change and make sure that everything's cool, and then just change where it's pushing that in a single keystroke. So it's like, and part of the reason that that seems to work the best is there's, based on how we do our security, sometimes there's problems with Git talking to the EC2. And so, like, to prevent having our sysadmins set up a special tunnel for it, I use rsync. So, policy. So workflow. Part of the reason that we use Drupal is that we need like multiple workflows. So when I first started, there were about 15 content types on the site, and the reason they did that was because that was the only way they knew how to separate the permissions for sections. They didn't want people and music staff with posting in interactive or in film. They wanted them to only post music posts, and so the way they did that in D6 was you create a content type that's music posts, and you assign certain people to only use the music post content type. It's very simple, but it got to be like super confusing when you're trying to like have a view that's all of the posts, and make sure that they sort a certain way, and et cetera, like kind of like balloons into this management problem for me. Because one person will say like, well, I wanted this one post to float to the top of that giant list view, and it's like, all right, well, we'll find a way to do this. Content types change constantly, as I mentioned before, and over the last couple of years, we get to make I've been able to influence the decisions about how we make content. So when I was first working on their installs, they all had a tiny MCE. They all had basically like an image file browser that was how they added their images. They weren't doing any compression. They weren't letting Drupal do any of the heavy lifting for them, basically. And you'd see posts with things like oddly bolded and like some funny color that's not in the theme, etc. And it's just like, that we gave them the freedom to do this. I'm like, yeah, but now it looks like poop, so I want to remove that. So one of the big things I started instituting as of this last season is everybody uses Markdown. And if you know how to use HTML, you're going to get edited severely. Like, one of us will go through your post and make sure that all of your tags close, because I don't want to see some box like floating off into space. So for the people who are generic content authors, we taught them Markdown. We said, this is how you write your posts. Problem solved. No unicorn link tags or anything like that.
How did that go over?
Yeah.
How did it go over?
Yeah, like were people receptive to Markdown, or did you have a hard time convincing people?
It was kind of split 50-50. Like, there was initial pushback from the people who manage content creation. And they're like, well, why do I have to do this? We all learned HTML. And after they got used to doing it and seeing that it was like a lot faster and they didn't have to type so many characters, it became a simple argument for this is what we're doing now. So a lot of winning the battles at South by for wanting to make a change to something is demonstration. You have to make them do it. Otherwise, they don't believe you. You can tell them all day that it's true. They won't believe you until you show them. So there's a lot of that. And for good reason. Like, people are skeptical. They've been burned by stuff before. So you got to get them to buy in, and sometimes you just got to do the manual labor. Yeah, okay. So changes, iteration. I think I kind of already brushed over this, but because of our structure, our changes get implemented year over year. So, and some of that comes out of like, how much time do I have to learn or implement a new technique on the site, and is it accomplishing a goal that's so important to our user base that it will improve their experience a certain way. And basically for that decision to be made, we have to talk it out, and if there's enough time and we feel like it's a good enough user experience decision, we'll implement it. And sometimes we're wrong and we make mistakes and we see a dip because, you know, a button is in a place it shouldn't be, or, you know, something isn't bright enough, or et cetera, et cetera. So, you know, sometimes we're our own worst enemy in that respect. Yes, okay. So there's a very large range of technical proficiency in our group, which leads to a lot of very interesting problems. So a lot of our content creators aren't necessarily super familiar with how Drupal works or understand what they're doing when they decide to add a menu item at random into one of the menus. And a lot of them don't understand the relationship, like how Drupal creates relationships between nodes and links and things like that. And so what this does is it creates things like, oh, you'll see, you know, some items show up on the homepage that most certainly shouldn't be there for some reason at 8 o'clock at night because someone decided that this was the time to try out this thing they've been thinking about. So part of like mitigating that has been instituting things like Markdown. We've created new types of users that have very limited access control, even though they're administrators. They can't, break something without us seeing, or they can't break something at all. Basically, if they try to and they get the access denied message, then they send us an email back. I tried to do this dumb thing and I couldn't do it. That means you can't do that dumb thing. So it's sometimes like these ripples are hard to see coming out of it, and a lot of the immediate web content creation staff has gotten really good at taking care of these things, and I don't have to be involved more and more. But every once in a while, something will slip through the cracks, and it just becomes a training issue at that point. Like, we need to reassess your skill sets and make Drupal do its job without you hurting it, basically. So this is our team. There are 7 developers that handle all of our apps, and there's 4 digital content staff that are in charge of managing social media, websites, what gets published, how it gets talked about. There are 2 system administrators. We have this guy named Pete and this guy named Tom. Pete tends to handle most of our forward-facing apps, so anything that has to be facing customers, that's usually his domain, and Tom tends to handle our internal tools. So we have a lot of apps that we develop to help manage the show that only we see, and no one else ever gets to see them. And then we have an editor who manages the posts from all of the departments, and there are about 50 people that have the capability of creating content but not necessarily publishing it or inserting it in any specific way. They basically just create nodes, but they exist only until we decide they can be seen in real life. So it's a small team, but we crank out a lot of stuff. What I do to do my job, I've gone to Sublime Text. I'm sure most of you have heard of it or use it. I use CodeKit for managing my SAS, all my SAS compiling. Not because I don't like using Ruby gems, but I have enough things to think about without having to remember to tell SAS to watch something. So it's a very simple app that lets you add projects in it. You can add frameworks and it will do all the heavy lifting for you and you can forget about it. GitX is another great tool that we use. We have a few projects that aren't managed entirely in Git, thankfully, and this has been a great way to visualize complicated hotfix merges and stuff like that. It's a good visual tool, and you can launch it from the command line from wherever you are. And then of course Brew. Because of the wide range of software we use, Brew is like, your Swiss Army knife, your best friend.
You're good
Yeah.
to go.
Am I good? Is that good? All right. So that's us in a heartbeat. Questions?
Yes.
Yeah.
Mobile apps, how do you handle the integration of these mobile apps that we see?
So the app development is done entirely separately. I'm sure you've seen on the app itself. It's developed by a company called Zomo.
Every year, or does that change every year?
Last 4 or 5, they've been with us a long time. We have an API for our schedule that is consumed by them, and that is how you're able to like merge. That's how you're able to see your schedule move from the website to the mobile app and back and forth, and also manage your connections in in social. That API is given to our developer. Any outside development integration that we need, we have a large API that we give people. It doesn't feed them anything that's dangerous for the users or us. So we have control over it, and we manage what they get to use, basically. So that's how we get through integration. But none of it's like directly integrated in terms of like the main website. It's all just consumed through this data feed.
Seems like it's gotten a lot better.
Yeah, the new iteration is a lot better. There's always growing pains because we have small stomachs and big eyes, I think is the way to look at it. Like, we get really excited about wanting to do things, and huh? I'm sorry?
It's the other way around.
The other way around.
Big eyes.
Big eyes, small stomachs.
Yeah. Now speaking of, there's pizza back here.
Awesome. So our app developer is really good, but there's definitely comes a point where time becomes the delimiting factor in how many features we can roll out and what is really solid. Like, there was a lot of talk last year about integrating Passbook into the app, and we totally scuttled it because it was super flaky and we didn't have enough time to harden it. So if something launches, even if it's not beautiful, it's hardened. So we make sure it's usable, but often it's not the most polished item. Or I shouldn't say often. Sometimes it's not the most polished. Any other questions?
So is the API a services model, or is it talking?
It has nothing to do with Drupal. It comes out of our. It's called the Event API, and it comes out of a database that is only attached to our schedule app, which is run in Rails, and it is totally divorced from anything you see on the website.
So can you talk about how you decide, or how it's been decided what makes it into Drupal and what makes it into a separate app?
Yeah, everything that's in Drupal is, I hate to put it this way, but like when the tools that we have were developed, it was like they built the schedule, the social, and the cart long before Drupal existed in the ecosystem of our dev team. And so anything they consider essentially brochure goes onto the Drupal site. So announcements, information that's consumed that doesn't have any real like interactive quality to it is in Drupal. And then things that have to do with how registrants interact with the event is done through the Rails apps for the most part. Yes, sir.
Was it fun to put together a responsive site finally for self?
It was fun to start working on it, and then like it was kind of a challenge because there's all these things when I got to the end of the first iteration of it that I had like they basically sit in the periphery and I update once a year or whatever, but I just didn't realize that they would become an issue for me, and then I'd have to go, well, shit, I can't fix that, so I'll fix it next year.
Super fast. So.
Thank you. The big victories I've had this year have been like essentially moving away from sprites. We use like font icons for everything, and I've been slowly migrating that stuff into the other apps so that they maintain that speed. you're taking notes on that part of it, symbol icons is where I go. They're worth every penny, and they're really effective and they're easy, and they integrate well into pretty much anything and everything. So I really recommend them. For the structure of like the site itself, like just reducing the amount of images that were in it, taking some of that workflow things that I wanted to happen, like making sure that all photos were a certain size and compressed a certain way before they're ever uploaded to the server was like a big part of it. So that's how I was able to accomplish it. And then like talking people off of the ledge of more slideshows. In our last 3 deployments of Drupal, so that would be EDU, B2B, and Eco. Each one of those, you'll see like a very deliberate change in how we're serving certain things. So now we're going to these like, they get 2 like featured spaces that they get to swap out every so often, because a lot of that front page real estate is about like telling you to go, you know, put in an ID into Panel Picker, or go buy badge, or hey, LeVar Burton is our keynote speaker at EDU, or something like that. So making sure that space is more locked down and is just faster to consume has been kind of like my MO, and so far I'm getting away with it for the most part.
Yeah.
But we'll see what happens.
I have a follow-up question. Since the time is the non-negotiation factor, right? And features can be cut and negotiated. But also another thing that kind of boils down to features is support across a bunch of different stuff.
Yeah.
So how do those conversations go down?
So, I hate to say it, but support's like an afterthought for me. I know I have to roll out updates. I'm not sure if I'm answering your question.
No, you are answering it correctly.
Okay.
Because I was kind of thinking that because it is South by, and like most people are going to have a like less than 3-year-old smartphone there and all that kind of stuff. So you can kind of get away with it. That's what I was expecting.
Yeah. So and like
we're not going to be serving pages to Uganda or anything for South by.
No. Yeah. So that is an interesting thing. Like since I started making the sites and started moving the apps into a responsive environment, we've seen our uptick of our consumption has gone up by half in mobile. So it used to be like 18%, and now it's like 35%, like across the board. And it wasn't that way before. It was like, oh, there's people looking at it. And I'm like, yeah, but they would all be looking at it this way if we did it this way.
It's awesome they have a responsive schedule. I've been waiting.
Yeah, I'm working on that. That's next year. I actually do get to like rebuild the schedule next year, which is like my thing. Yes, sir.
Oh, that's my question. Curious why, I guess more of a content question, why the brand of the speaker or the company of the speaker isn't listed, or sometimes a name may not be listed next to the topic.
On the schedule?
Or is it there?
I do not believe it's listed in like, I think it's listed under their profiles, and most of that stuff, not all of that is fed into the schedule. Those speaker profiles, the content, what gets displayed there is slightly different. Like you'll see more of where people are from in South by Social than you will in the schedule, unless they deliberately get their bios into the panel or something like that. So like you're not gonna see Sony BMI, like, oh yeah, that's the other thing too. Like special guests are not like, they're not going to show up the same as like a general speaker will. So because because it's not them who's putting in the content, it's their assistant, and if they put in the content wrong, then that's the way it displays. And we tell them, but it's on them to make sure that who they are, where they're from is correct on the site. So that is another interesting thing about how we consume information, is that a lot of the programming from our speakers or performers, a lot of it's inputted by them. We basically give them a tool to submit that information, we consume it, and then we spit it back out on the site. And if it looks broken, we tell them, And if they decide to ignore it, sorry, you look bad at South by Southwest because you didn't do your due diligence, you know? So, any other questions? Yes, sir.
The traffic that you get, is it mostly anonymous on the Drupal sites, or do you have?
All anonymous.
All anonymous, okay.
There are no users signing into our site. So that's part of security also. You cannot get into our site unless you're on our network, which is just VPN. So you can't go to /user, or you can, you'll just get access to that, I think. So
A super 403.
yeah. That's right. So that's another part of our security thing. We just don't want people signing into the site ever unless they're part of us. So if you have VPN, that means you're special and you get to touch the site, but outside that, it's locked down.
I was also curious about Postgres and why the choice of Postgres was that made. Was that decision made pre-Drupal, or?
It was pretty me. So yeah, we've talked about moving to other things, but this goes into the what do I have time to deal with workflow. And part of the reason I think that we're using Postgres is that a lot of our apps use Postgres. So having one database that you're managing, or database type that you're managing, is kind of nice instead of 3. So for instance, like some of our other apps run on Couch, and it's super fast and it's super sexy and it's great, but it's not good for Drupal. So at least for how we use it. Any other questions?
Yeah, why didn't you accept my session?
I'm not part of slotting. Those important people are on the second and third floor.
So wait, actually, there's a legitimate question there.
Okay.
Like for the panel picker and
Yeah.
all that, are there any plans to move that to Drupal, or are there several stable apps that you just have no interest in migrating to for the sake of keeping them stable?
Yeah. So when I first got called into that project, I said, well, we could do this in Drupal, and they all went,
We could.
nope, it's a Rails app. So it's a Rails app. And that's been the decision. I am the only Drupal person, so there are the other 3 developers that are developers. There's a FileMaker developer, 2 FileMaker developers, me, and then 3 Rails guys. So they a lot of what I do now is because of how they work. And a lot of the tools that I've adopted into my Drupal workflow for developing the theme have obviously come out of the Rails mentality of how to do things. And that's the way they like it. And I've suggested stuff in the past, but it doesn't seem to be like, they kind of just think of Drupal as like, it's for showing blogs. Like that's like how they view it. And I'm not going to win that battle with them.
That's like very wrong, though.
Drupal's
not even good at making blogs.
No, it's not even good at making blogs. I have this complaint constantly, but it's something that I won't get to win on, basically, because all my time is spent making sure that the blogs look and function correctly. Or I shouldn't say all, the bulk of my time. So it is definitely a product of the environment to some degree. I think if they are all more interested in offloading some of the effort that goes into maintaining those services, then maybe they'd consider it. But they're definitely like, we do Rails and we do Rails real good, so let's keep doing Rails. And it's worked for them. Like the shopping cart doesn't get pushed over. A lot of our apps, like, they're very solid for the amount of strain we put them under, and they're very specific. So for them, it's like, it's a good business decision and it's worked for them. So until there's something really compelling, like our check-in app is run in JavaScript, and that was a compelling argument because we could build it all in jQuery and Couch, and it looks awesome. It's super fast. But you know, the other stuff, it just is the way it is for right now. Until we have a chance to like really review it and you know, select a different service. Cool. Yeah. Yeah. I didn't get one framework question. I was like waiting for, well, why don't you use Omega base theme or Zen or any? No.
Omega's on the outs now.
Oh, it's on the outs. Oh, poor thing.
People are starting to upgrade and they realize what a terrible idea it was.
Absolutely.
Well, what is your base theme?
Huh?
What is your base theme? Teach me about that.
There is no base theme. There is the South by Southwest theme that gets retooled every 3 months or so, a little bit. And you'll see I post like gists every once in a while for things that piss me off that I don't want to use a module for, and I want Drupal to do it and just do it and not argue with me. So you'll see little things like that posted in my GitHub. I tweeted one today for dealing with OG image suggestions for Facebook sharing. Because you know, you get a client and they're like, oh, thanks for posting our blog. When my 5-year-old puts the blog post into Facebook, it grabs some random image from your site that isn't your logo or my logo. Why is that? And you have to tell them, sorry, Facebook, and then you know, try to find a way to fix it. Yeah.
So what about big people like GM or Sony BMI or Circus Maximus? I mean, do you get a lot of pressure from these people saying, we're big, we're giving you this, so do this for us now? Or?
Oh yeah, sure. We tell them, a lot of it will depend on, is this an interesting integration or activation? Can we afford to do it in time? Can we afford to do it in money? And does South by Southwest want to do it? So it's still very much privately controlled. Like we have a director, and if we run something past him and we're like, we don't like this, do you like this? And he goes no, then it doesn't matter who they are, how much money they have, not going to happen. But if it's something that he thinks is a worthwhile benefit to the event, then
Is that Sean?
it'll have. Yeah. No, not Sean. Roland is the man.
The higher.
He is our feudal lord. He commands us. Yes.
Are there longer term goals than 1 year? Like dream for 5 years from now or something?
So I came in with I had some things that I wanted to change, and I have a checklist, and I have goals for things I want to change. And I'm sure a lot of the other team does too, but like I was talking about before with like how features and things get improved over time, like every year I get to win a small battle. So like last year it was site's responsive. This year it's the site has almost 0 images and we use icon fonts, and you know, now there's smart user types and only like 4 content types that are all in features that we deploy across all of our sites. So it's like I've locked in certain things that make my life and their life easier. So there's a few more things I'd like to implement, but I feel like the general atmosphere at South by is that we want to continue to make things better, but will we have time to do it, and can we? You know, so that's a really hard question to answer in a super direct way. So I'm sorry.
When doing responsive, whoever designs it, they do like responsive mocks and stuff like that. You have to manipulate it how you think it's going to work.
No. No, I did not design it, and I designed it in the browser. So I set targets for things, and I try to build off of what I learned the year before, and do it that way. In fact, that's another interesting thing. So none of our I don't do any of the branding at South by. There's a company who does the branding, and then I get to take what they give us and make it work and make it happen. And so this year I was like, I'll just take this awesome shaped logo and make the site as flat and clean as I can based on the assets they've given me. And what happens on the website is really me. So if you see something out of whack, you can totally blame me and tell me about it, because I don't know, most likely. Or I do know, and I was like, fuck it, nobody's gonna see that. Anything else?
So how do you break up, you mentioned earlier that you had all these content types because different departments needed to be able to access just their one content.
That was
type.
before, yeah.
How do you handle that now if you're down to 4 content types?
So how we handle that now is training. We have a few tiers of user permission roles, essentially, and those tiers of people are basically allowed to create things but never publish them, and then there's another tier that's allowed to review and publish. And that is ultimately how we were able to solve that, because it was, to me, it's ridiculous to have all these different separations, and that is impossible to let all those people just publish on their own anyways, because it's going to match you in all different formats. So there needs to be a review process where it's like, okay, Phil wants to make this post about the bad plus, and he used a mixture of HTML and Markdown. Make sure it's right, don't let him publish it until it's done, and then the ownership moves to the publisher, basically, for anything that's broken. So yeah, training. Anything else? No?
Well, awesome, folks.
Yeah. All right, cool, thank you.